Last time on Let's Talk with Tom, we talked about Carmen Sandiego. Now we're doing it again. Notice the symbolism here in this illustration. The fact that last time I did it where her face is covered, and now her face is not covered, because now we're talking about spoilers. I've been setting up the signs, the spoiler alerts, I've been doing all of that. I've done a part, I've covered my bases, and now it's time for all of us to sit down, have a discussion on Let's Talk with Tom, the show where I have a casual discussion about any show I want to talk about. And now we are going to talk about Carmen Sandiego and how it pulled off Shadow-san's moment of redemption. I loved it because I predicted it, but then they threw me off track. They planted seeds of doubt in my brain, so I would think, nah, they ain't actually gonna do it. They ain't actually gonna follow through with this. They're gonna do something else. But no, they did it. They did what I predicted they would do, even when I thought they wouldn't. So when the finale came and they did it, it was like camping, because it was intense. Now, some of you might have seen what I saw from Shadow-san's introduction that telegraphed this turn. But regardless, I want to go in depth on it, so let's go back to that scene. We were introduced to Shadow-san when Carmen was pleading her case for enrolling in Vile's School for Thieves. Shadow-san sticks out in this scene because he is the only member of the faculty who tries to discourage Carmen and is not open to Carmen joining their program. He is vocally against the idea. And the way this is framed is Shadow-san is the antagonist in this situation, and that's intentional. They want to throw us off so we would see him as a hurdle for our protagonist to overcome. But if you think about it beyond Carmen's perspective at the time, he really was the only one there who was looking out for her. Carmen was sheltered her entire life. She was a good-hearted but competitive person who was raised to see thievery as a victimless crime, and taking part wasn't hurting anyone. It was just another industry, like how some people go to med school, or people go to Harvard to learn law. People go to Vile to learn how to be thieves. And this misconception was something that the faculty of Vile was well aware of in Carmen. They knew she was naive, immature, and sheltered from the ability to make an informed decision on entering their profession. The fact that Carmen was under the care of Vile, learning from their tutors, and being a part of the campus culture meant that she was a prodigy. She was the most qualified candidate for their program. And as we know, Vile's graduates go on to work for them. So Carmen was built into a golden prospect for their organization, and by withholding the outside world from her, they were manipulating her into being that prospect. And Shadow-san wasn't okay with this. Shadow-san is a professional thief. He is seasoned. He has seen a world that Carmen hasn't. He understands the business they're in, how dangerous it is, as well as the moral compromises required. And he knows that once you're in, it's nearly impossible to get out. These are facts that everyone on the faculty knows. Yet everyone but Shadow-san is willing to lead her down this path. They have no problem letting Carmen make such a big life decision, knowing it's an uninformed one, knowing that she's not mature enough to understand the weight of the decisions she's making. As the adults and only parental figures in Carmen's life, it's the Vile faculty's responsibility to try and guide her down the correct path. Yet everyone but Shadow-san is willing to lead her down a path that will most likely be wrong for her. But if it works out, it will definitely benefit them. This motivation for Shadow-san was made clear when he gave his warning to Carmen, that this is the point of no return, and that she better be sure that this is what she wants. Which we know it actually isn't, because as soon as she gets an outside perspective and sees what the world is actually like, she turns against Vile. The story was setting up for us to see everything from Carmen's point of view, to empathize with her perspective. We understand her motivations and we experience the narrative through her. And as a result, her motivations start to become our motivations. Even if only because we know that her motivations are what's needed to move the story forward and keep it from dragging. And the narrative up until this point was leading up to Carmen enrolling in Vile. As a result, when we reach this point in the story, our first instinct is to resist Shadow-san's attempt at guidance, because that guidance obstructs Carmen from her goals, and as a result, our goals as the viewers. And this sets up Shadow-san as an obstacle for Carmen to overcome moving forward. An obstacle in her way of enrolling, an obstacle in her way of graduating. And yet Shadow-san is the only thing obstructing Carmen from facing the crossroads of becoming a professional thief, only to realize it's not what she really wants. But we don't think that initially. We think the opposite, because we've already been conditioned to see Shadow-san as an obstacle, so we're led away from considering that he's actually helping Carmen. And all of these motivations that I've stated for Shadow-san, I suspected in the beginning, but didn't really believe until the finale, when everything was revealed. And the reason I didn't believe this was because Shadow-san's consistently cold nature, on top of his framing, was enough to convince me that he genuinely didn't like Carmen. And any other clues were too vague to pin down. The reason I love this twist so much is it does just enough to plant the seeds in your mind while leading you astray from the actual conclusion. Having so many scenes with no context, establishing loose ends that all came together at that moment of revelation. For example, on the night that Carmen escaped from the Isle of Vile, there were no ties to Shadow-san helping her escape that we knew of. The only clue was a scene that just seemed like it didn't make sense. And that was the fact that the cleaners found that the cords in the helicopter that they could catch Carmen in had been cut.
She does not miss a trick.
Implying that Carmen was the one who cut them. But that didn't make sense because this whole story, we were following Carmen in her perspective, and there was never a point where she came anywhere near where that helicopter was, nor would she have time to do that with everything she was trying to do already. So it just seems like bad writing at the time because there was nothing indicating how that happened. At least that's what I thought at first. Because there is a scene of Shadow-san going and getting his katana very shortly before the scene where the cleaners find out that the helicopter has been sabotaged. But the fact that Shadow-san ran out onto the dock with his sword drawn, running towards Carmen, implied that that's what that scene was alluding to. And because we got that establishment and anticlimactic conclusion, that was the only tie that I personally saw. But then once it's revealed that Shadow-san was actually the one who sabotaged the helicopter, it all makes sense, and it all comes together. Another example of this is using Coach Brunt as a misdirect. Having Carmen say that she was never sure, but she was pretty certain that Coach Brunt was the one who found her as a baby in Argentina and took her into the whole family of Vile. And they never gave us a reason to doubt that. And for me, that completely omitted the possibility that it would have been anyone else. But in reality, it was Shadow-san.
It was you. You were the one who found me.
Which would probably be obvious if I had thought to look for it. But you know what? In the future, listen, Carmen Sandiego writers, I'm on to you. Anytime in the future when you say something isn't so sure, they say maybe this was the case, I'm gonna be skeptical. I'm wise to your tricks now. I'm wise to them. I'm gonna be mad suspicious of any inkling of uncertainty. So one of the only questions I have left is, what are Shadow-san's true motivations? We know that he didn't want Carmen to follow the path of crime or have to face the rest of the faculty once she realized that a life of crime wasn't for her. But why did he care so much? Why is he willing to give up his entire career for this one person? Obviously, you can say that there's a bond between him and Carmen because he found her as a baby and watched her grow up, but I don't think it's just that. The fact that he made such a point to tell Carmen that once you become a thief, there is no turning back. Maybe that wasn't just a warning. Maybe Shadow-san was also projecting onto Carmen some of his own feelings. It's possible that a younger, more naive, possibly desperate Shadow-san found himself following the path of crime, and over the years has grown more compassionate and empathetic and developed a moral compass to fundamentally disagree with the life that he's living. Shadow-san says on the night that Carmen escaped, he wasn't running to fight her, he was running to join her. And perhaps Carmen was just the catalyst for him actually doing something to make that happen. Maybe seeing an innocent child grow up awakened a warmer side to his personality, or maybe the fact that the faculty was so willing to manipulate that child into being a criminal was too much for him to justify associating with Vile any longer. And of course, moving forward, what role will Shadow-san play? It seems right now like he's burned his bridge with Vile, and assuming that's the case, he doesn't seem to be looking for a close alignment with Carmen just yet. It's safe to say they're on the same side, but the narrative doesn't seem quite ready to have the characters working in close proximity. So what happens next? I guess we'll have to wait and see in Season 2, which has been announced, but there's no release date yet. So for now, that's all I gotta say. Thank you so much for watching. Roll the outro. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!